Fires, floods, civil unrest, natural disasters. Will you survive what's coming? This is the Will You Survive podcast. So we're talking about city prepping here today. And I've seen a lot of videos on this and a lot of people claiming that you can survive decently if you are in the city, and I guess I'm going to argue against that. I work in Seattle. I have for the last 5 years. I work around in the downtown area, so I'm around a lot of the homeless and crime problems. But I'm going to talk about what you can do if you're there, what you should be doing. But ultimately, you need to be thinking about leaving the city. And I know it's probably unrealistic. I see a lot of people telling people to buy property and move out of the city, and that's really unrealistic right now given the state of things. But you should at least have some friends or family outside the city that you can go to stay with when things get bad. But most importantly, when you're in the city, if you're starting prepping and you're new to this, I think the three most important things you need to worry about are shelter, food, and water. You probably have shelter, but you need to have food set aside and water set aside. And water is important. You're probably on a city system, and those systems will go down if natural disaster occurs or if there's long periods of civil unrest. You know, all those city systems rely on people and technology, and if they can't come to work, or the technology is broken, or the power is out, then that's going to mean no services for you. That means no water coming out of your tap. Of course, the biggest problem with this is if you're living in an apartment, where you're going to stack this stuff up. You've got limited space. I know there's things you can buy. There's those plastic water bricks that you can buy that you can fill with water, and those make pretty good use of space, but you're still limited with where you're going to put this stuff. As far as food storage goes, you know, people tell you to have 72 hours, or, you know, some people say have 2 weeks, but you need to be looking for long-term food storage. You need, like, you know, we're talking like 3 months. A year would be ideal. But don't let that be overwhelming. You need to start somewhere. You need to start right away. This is the time to start if you haven't. And you need to get stuff put away. You also need to not advertise the fact that you're putting food away or storing food. You know, if you're in an apartment building, you don't want your neighbors to know that. You don't want them to know where they need to come if they need food because they didn't bother putting anything away. And a lot of people don't have food stored up. You know, right now you can go to the store and get whatever you want, anytime you want. And I don't think people really believe that they need to stack food, but it would be very easy, even if there wasn't civil unrest or a natural disaster or a long-term power outage. You've got all kinds of other issues. You know, the grocery stores don't store more than a couple days worth of items because the trucks are coming in constantly. But if there's a problem with shipping, which could be in another state, you're not going to get what you need to the store. So just recently, the nation's largest frozen foods shipper was hacked. And this has happened several times over the last few years, but this last hack attack was pretty big, and they were down for 2 or 3 days, and trucks couldn't come in and get items. 90% of every grocery store's frozen foods in this country went through this one shipping center. And, you know, this could have been a big problem. They resolved it, but, you know, these hack attacks are more frequent, and they're going to get worse, I believe. Something you need to think about. If you're living in an apartment, there's a whole host of issues here, but obviously you're around too many people. People that are going to become desperate or want something from you or become violent or off their meds because they can't get meds or whatever. The other thing you need to worry about in an apartment building is fires. I worked for the fire department for 17 years, and a lot of accidental fires happen in apartment buildings. Pots on stoves, candles, electric blankets can start a fire. If there's no heat and somebody's using propane, that could accidentally start a fire. Something to think about, because in a long-term disaster or grid down or whatever, services are going to be limited. You better not expect that the fire department's going to show up, because maybe they're not even coming to work. They've got families they need to take care of too. So, or maybe they can't get to the city to work. Most of the firefighters don't live in the city. They commute. If they're unable to get there, then you're on your own. Like I stated, no food. People around you may not have food. If you cook, they're going to smell it. I mean, in an apartment, you smell everything. So this is an issue. And like I said, no water. That's going to become a problem. Septic is going to become a problem. If the septic system gets plugged or backed up or isn't functioning down the line, it's going to back up into your apartment. It's not going to flush. Where are you going to go to the bathroom? You don't want to waste water using that to try to flush your toilet, and that may not work anyway if it's backed up. So again, big problems with being in an apartment building. The other thing that seems to go largely overlooked is gangs, criminals, homeless, drug addicts. This is already a big problem in the cities, and it's going to become a huge problem when you've got a grid down or a natural disaster or limited law enforcement, limited services, you're on your own. How are you going to defend yourself against that? What are you going to do to keep you and your family safe? You're going to have some way to defend yourself, get to safety, whatever, because they're going to take over. I mean, gangs are a huge problem in the city, and I think a lot of people largely try to ignore this, but I also worked in law enforcement for 9 years, and I can tell you without a doubt, there are gangs actively working in every major city in this country, numerous gangs, and when an event like this occurs or there's civil unrest, they're going to take advantage of that, and they're going to look for control of different parts of the city, and you do not want to be there if that happens. The other thing is you're going to have lack of pharmaceutical drugs, so there's a lot of people on mental health drugs, and when they can't get access to those drugs or whatever, their behavior is going to change drastically, and they could also become very dangerous. And then you're going to have the lack of illegal drugs that, a lot of people on the street are using, a lot of criminals are using, and again, they're going to become desperate, angry, violent. You don't want to be around that. Like I said, city systems depend on people and technology, and if you don't have the people or the technology is not working, then none of your systems are going to work. None of these apartments are going to have water, electricity. You're not going to have fire and police. Like I said, they don't live in the city. They commute in. And if they can't make it there or don't feel like it's worth going there because they've got to protect their families, then you're on your own. And police in most of these major cities are already defunded and demoralized, and they don't really want to be there anyway. So if something like this happens, most of them probably are not going to show up, I can tell you that. If your plan is to rely on government to come bail you out or bring you food or provide food for you, you better do some research. Look how long it took the government to respond to Katrina. It's not going to ever be any different. That's just the way government handles things, very slowly, if at all. So you've got to plan for yourself. You've got to plan to take care of yourself and have what you need and access to what you need when you need it. I mean, you'll survive for a little while in the city, but, there's probably no way you're getting out of there once whatever happens, happens. There'll be a small window of time, maybe, depending on what the situation is. I mean, if it's a major earthquake, you're trying to get out of, say, Seattle, they're expecting most of the bridges around Seattle to collapse if it's a big one, if it's a big earthquake. And so there's no way out of the city at that point. Other events, there may be a small window of time for you to pack up and get out. So you should have a plan on where you're going, how you're going to get there. But you've been on the freeway on a Friday night, just a regular old Friday night, and it's all jammed up. Now imagine everybody trying to get out of the city all at once. You're not going anywhere. You're jammed up. So if you see something coming ahead of time, you should make plans to just go stay somewhere, get out. If it blows over, it blows over. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But better safe than sorry. You don't want to be stuck there. You really need to have friends out in the country or family out in the country that you can go stay with. Even the suburbs is better than being in the heart of the city. So, just my opinion. I don't think you should let other people lull you into thinking that you could properly prepare for long-term survival in the city, because you just can't. It won't happen. It's too dangerous. There's too many things that can go wrong and not work. And this is something you really need to think about, and think about soon, because I think we're heading into a serious time of civil unrest and economic problems. The economy for 2021 is not looking good, and with the lockdowns and everything else going on, you're going to see a lot of desperation and probably a lot of civil unrest and who knows what else. But you need to plan now. Now is the time, if you haven't started already. All right, well, I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.